First Things, episode number 24.
I seem to be lost.
And so you're working around the clock so you don't take time for yourself to feel like an actual human being.
I used to feel like no matter how hard I worked, I was just spinning my wheels.
Try to be perfect and try to have everything in place at one point in time, and you can't.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome back to First Things, the podcast dedicated to practical productivity based on modern research. My name is Brandon Vaughn, and it's my goal to help you apply productive solutions to your life to help you live with less stress, greater passion, and amazing results. As always, great to have you here with me today. I am so thankful and appreciative of you giving your time to me and for us to go through yet again another part of the series on procrastination. I've heard from many of you via my blog and also on Facebook and Twitter about how this show has been resonating with you, how this series on procrastination has really been helping you, and that is amazing to me. I love that I'm reaching out to many, many people and helping them with this rather sticky issue. Now, just a quick update. I've mentioned to you in the several past episodes how I've taken on a new project, and we'll mention it again today, practically how I'm applying these same principles to my own life, but I am attempting to live my dream of writing music. And my goal was that I would have 14 songs written by the end of January. And as of today, I have 14 ideas of songs started out of 14. So I've almost reached my goal. 6 of those songs are finished, and I haven't recorded them yet. I'm just writing them. So I have 8 songs I need to finish up, maybe a lyric here or there, a verse or a chorus or something like that. And I have about 12 days or so as I'm recording this a little bit ahead of time to when I publish the actual show. But it's very much within my reach. I'm so excited. I'm applying the same principles that I'm talking about here for something that I have procrastinated much of my life about, and I'm so excited. I'm setting small goals. I'm using this reverse calendar. Every time I do part of a song, I'm getting super excited because I'm seeing these results. I'm thinking of the journey. I'm living in the now moment. And yes, I have this ultimate goal of 14 songs, but I'm breaking it down into these smaller segments that I'm conquering. And just, it's amazing to me. I've never tried it in this area of my life. I've tried it in other areas of my life. And I'm like a kid in a candy store. I'm so excited by the results that I'm getting from this very thing that I'm teaching. Things that I know work, but I've just never tried it in this other area. And I've also been trying this as well in exercising and eating well, going back to my first things and that I've done in the past and really enjoying that as well. So we're going to get into this today and talk about the UNschedule, which is the next chapter 6 in Neil's book, which is going to kind of put together the last 2 or 3 weeks all into one and talk about how to practically implement this. Really quick before we get started though, I have actually figured out how to see comments in other countries in iTunes. Just figured that out just the last few days. And I have a lot of great listeners all over the world. And my top countries besides the United States are Canada, the UK, Germany, and Australia. And there's many, many others, Brazil and China and Japan and just all over the place, Norway, just Africa, the people that I'm greatly appreciative that you listen to my show. But my top foreign countries from the US are Canada, UK, Germany, and Australia. And I looked in there and there aren't any comments from any of you guys. I think there is one from Australia, so thank you so much for leaving me that. But I want to ask a favor to all of my listeners outside of the United States. Would you consider leaving me some feedback and comments, especially if you're listening to me on iTunes, and specifically for my fans and listeners up in Canada, in the UK, London area, Germany, Australia, would you please consider leaving me some feedback? I would just so appreciate that. I know a lot of my listeners are in the United States, but I have a fair amount of you overseas. And it would just mean so much to me to get your feedback, and not just to promote the podcast, but I really enjoy hearing from you guys. I read your comments. Every single comment that somebody has left me, I've read it, I've internalized it, and it's a motivation point for me and also something that I use to improve the show as well. So I would greatly appreciate any of you guys leaving me feedback, and thank you for that ahead of time. So now to the topic of today, the UNschedule. Which is a very interesting title, and I'll explain why Neil uses that particular title in his for this particular chapter. But let's start off with a quote from Neil from the book. Neil says this: "Let's not kid ourselves. there's no such thing as a life of complete play. Trying to escape work by procrastinating will only increase your anxiety. Only work will diminish your anxiety. Neither chocolate chip cookies nor TV will lessen tension about an overwhelming or unpleasant task. Neither procrastination nor playing will take away your anxiety when there's something difficult to face. The only thing that really helps is to start working, which is what we talked about last week. But that's exactly the problem, isn't it? You can't seem to get yourself to start working, at least not the way you feel about work. Work has meant deprivation, facing overwhelming tasks, facing insecurities and internal and external pressures for perfection, and forcing yourself to do something you'd rather not do. But what if, based on a simple system, you could learn to face your fears and tolerate your imperfection long enough to complete just a few minutes of quality work, enabling you to enjoy your leisure time without feeling guilty? So the last few weeks, we have been talking about the issue of guilt-free play and how important that is, that you put that into your life and you schedule it, that you don't neglect it. We've talked about the importance of just starting and not being obsessed with finishing, but using the reverse calendar to look at your ultimate deadline and then working backwards to where you should start and starting and letting that be the total focus. So we're going to put all of that together in what Neil calls the UNschedule. And this is a basic schedule, but it's kind of backwards than the way most of us are used to. The basic idea is that, first of all, we think of starting some major task or project by just devoting 30 minutes to it. No more than maybe 30 minutes each day to this task. See, the important thing, again, is to get started. And often the hardest part is just starting. Many who get started will find momentum to keep pushing forward and finishing if they can just get going. So the point is that if you have an overwhelming task in your life and you quite frankly don't know where to start, then just start small. And you can start by just devoting 30 minutes to this particular task. Now, obviously, this depends on a lot of things, such as the fact that you have a little bit of time to complete something. If you have a very hard deadline for something, then I would recommend that you listen to last week's episode about the reverse calendar and actually work backwards to see exactly what you need to do and by when to accomplish that task. But for many tasks in our lives, many projects, when we have a little bit of time to deal with them, then, and if they seem overwhelming, then devote little amounts of time. And what Neil suggests is that you devote just 30 minutes each day to get started. And then maybe after you get started, then maybe you devote more time to it. But still, what Neil would suggest, and I would suggest as well, is that you limit yourself to 30-minute segments. You should think of your day in 30-minute blocks. If you are a manager, I would highly encourage you to schedule your meetings in 30-minute blocks. To stop these hour-long meetings or longer, think of 30-minute meetings as a maximum for your employees and for your staff. And for everything in your life, think in terms of 30 minutes. There is a great book on running called The Running Handbook. And in there, the author suggests that 30 minutes is kind of like the magic point of running. That if you will run for at least 30 minutes, you will reap the major benefits of running. And sure, if you run more than 30 minutes, you get more exercise and you might burn more calories. But the optimal point at which you get the main benefits of running happens around 30 minutes. There's something magical about 30 minutes. And if you will devote your life and your schedule around 30-minute increments. So if you have a huge project that you need to do, well, and it seems overwhelming, well, then just do 30 minutes once a day. So you start it today and you only do 30 minutes and then and you don't do anything more today. Tomorrow you do 30 more minutes and then you stop and then you don't work on it until the next day. And then as you start gaining momentum and you feel less stress about this particular project, then maybe you devote 2 30-minute segments the following day, but not back to back. You space them out and you do maybe 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes in the afternoon, and you're focused on this, but it's small, quality, focused work. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode with me writing songs, I've actually been applying this to my songs. I did it just today. So I had 12 out of 14 songs and I needed to write 2 more songs. And I started feeling that pressure. I started feeling that stress again. Oh, I've got to do 2 songs and I'm not really behind that much, but I am just a little bit. I have just a few days until the end of the month. Can I actually make this? And I said, okay, listen, quit stressing yourself out about this. You're going to just sit down and take the next 30 minutes and just toy around and see if you can come up with some ideas. And lo and behold, I came up with 2 ideas that were going to be the last 2 songs. And the whole reason why I'm telling you about my songs is simply because I want you to know that this is a real application for me today. This is a real dilemma, a real problem, a real desire and passion inside of me that I have not realized in my life yet. It is a dream of mine that I have spent 20 years procrastinating on. Yes, I'm very serious. There are some things like degrees and jobs and different things like that I have not procrastinated on. I love music very much. And this is one of those areas that for some reason is kind of, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Mr. Holland's Opus, where he is going to write this symphony and he takes a job as a school teacher because he is convinced he's going to have all this extra time in his schedule to write music. And what he finds is that he doesn't have any time, and then he has a family and a child, and his time just basically disappears. And it takes him nearly his entire lifetime as a teacher, as chronicled in the movie, before he actually writes his first symphony, his first classical piece that actually the band at the school plays for him at the end of the movie. And I felt very much like that. I've spent 20 years doing music, playing music for other people, toying around with song ideas, but never fully writing my own stuff and putting it out. 20 years procrastinating. And I can talk about my degrees and such, but those are victories that I've already won over procrastination. But the music, the songs, well, that is something fresh. That is some deep, dark, black spot in my life that I'm currently overcoming. So this is a new battle in front of me. So it's very fresh for me. And so the reason why I keep bringing up this example is because I'm living it right now and I'm overcoming procrastination, a very stubborn procrastination in my life that has really refused to give way. And now I'm actually seeing it disappear, applying these very techniques that I'm trying to teach to you right now. And so far, the key to me is simply to get started. Now, in this case, writing music is a very leisure activity for me. So it's not a job for me. It's not really work for me. It's a joy. It's a creativity passion point for me. But it is intimidating. It's very stressful for me at times if I let it be. So I have to learn the key. And for me, the key right now is that I simply start. I quit focusing so much on the destination, but swim in the journey of it, to just get started. And when I first started, I determined to just spend 30 minutes a night working on songs. And I've kept that most nights. And sometimes I've actually gone over that because I wasn't even looking at the clock. I was just absorbed in what I was doing. And in 21 days, I've managed to have 6 full songs and the start of 8 others. And to think of this, now this is what amazes me. I've been procrastinating for 20 years over something that has taken me 20 days to accomplish. And how did I do that? By applying these principles of guilt-free play, of reverse calendars, of focus on starting and moving forward and pushing out the fear of failure, pushing out perfectionism, just getting in there and going after it. Now, another key idea of the UNschedule is that after you do this, after you do work for just 30 minutes, then reward yourself with whatever motivates you. Is it time with friends, maybe sports, reading, music, or just whatever that is fun to you? And let me read this quote from Neil about this idea. He says that the UNschedule is a weekly calendar of committed recreational activities that divides the week into manageable pieces with breaks, meals, scheduled socializing, and play. In addition, it's a record of your productive, uninterrupted work. It provides producers with a pre-scheduled commitment to guilt-free time for recreation, plus a realistic look at the actual time available for work. This method of scheduling encourages you to start earlier on your project because you now realize how little time is actually available for work after you deduct daily chores, meetings, commuting, meals, sleep, and leisure. In addition, starting is easier because 30 minutes of work is too little to be intimidating, while it is enough to make a good start and to receive a break or reward. 30 minutes reduces work to small, manageable, rewardable chunks that lessens the likelihood that you will feel overwhelmed by the complexity and length of large or menacing projects. The UNschedule builds your confidence in 2 ways. First, it gives you immediate and frequent rewards following short periods of work rather than delaying a sense of accomplishment until the task is completed. Second, the habit of recording each period of work gives you a visible reward that allows you to see how much concentrated, uninterrupted work you have completed each day and each week. The UNschedule's focus on 30-minute blocks of work creates a non-threatening goal that even the most timid procrastinator can tackle without fear. 30 minutes of steady work is enough to give you a sense of accomplishment without creating the fear of failure that often accompanies the scheduling of longer, less realistic periods of work that are seldom achieved or even started because they're so overwhelming. Now, friends, that is a great quote from the book, and I would encourage you to possibly just rewind. I'm not going to read it and bore you again if you got it the first time, but I would encourage you to rewind the show just a little bit and listen to that quote from Neil, or better yet, get the book and read it and let it just soak in what he's talking about. So basically, here's the idea, just boiling it down to its most simple terms. Basically, you start by first planning your leisure and recreation time. Now, this is going to feel very strange for some of you, very odd. In fact, you may even feel it's wrong or you feel guilty about it, but do it. You first start planning your week or your month. I would encourage you to plan weekly, but if you want to plan your month, that's okay. But you first start doing your planning by putting in your leisure and your recreation first and foremost. And this is a psychological lift for you, because when you know that you're not creating a life that has no fun or freedom in it, your mind will actually work with you and not against you. Now you're going to fully be able to plan your work. Now, a few weeks ago, I talked about how some cultures and religions see their day beginning at 6 p.m. at night, which is fascinating to me because basically the idea is that they start their day in rest and sleep. Their day begins at night, and basically the beginning of their day is that they go to sleep, and that's how they start their day. And then they get up, and the latter part of the day, the end of the day, they work. So their day is sleep, then work, whereas most people that aren't in those cultures or in those particular religions actually see the opposite, is that they get up and they work to then sleep. And it's the exact opposite. And I find it very freeing to see it the other way around, that you sleep first, then you work. And that is basically what's at play here in this UNschedule, that you first of all need to ensure your rest, your leisure, your recreation, your creativity first. You make that your first thing that you schedule. Then from that, you move over into your work. Then you're actually safe to work. In essence, you are putting more time into your leisure and more quality into your work. More time for leisure, more quality for work. And when you do this, you should basically embrace what Neil refers to as 7 principles of the unscheduled life. Now, I don't even know if Neil really says these are 7 principles. They're almost kind of hidden in the book. If you're not careful, he doesn't emphasize this a lot. But I think this is a very important kind of mantra, a very good overview of basically what you're trying to create by doing this type of scheduling in your life. So let me read this really quick, and I want to read it again. So these are the basic principles of what you should strive for by doing this type of scheduling. First of all, do not work more than 20 hours a week on a given project. Do not work more than 5 hours a day on a particular project. You must exercise, play, or dance at least 1 hour a day. You must take at least 1 day a week off from your work. You should aim for starting on 30 minutes of quality work. You need to work for an imperfect, perfectly human first effort, which we've talked about in previous episodes, and you need to start small. So let me read that again. This is what you're aiming for. This is your goal in doing this type of scheduling. You don't want to work more than 20 hours a week on a given project. You don't want to work more than 5 hours a day on that particular project. You need to exercise and play or dance or do something fun at least 1 hour every day. You need to take at least 1 day a week off from any work. You need to aim for starting and scheduling your life in 30-minute increments, and your 30-minute increments of work needs to be very quality-focused work. You need to not worry about perfectionism and instead be willing to be imperfect, perfectly human first efforts. Just get started. Don't worry about finding the magic starting point. Don't worry about it being perfect when you start. Just get moving and start small. Now, I think those are great principles to live life by. And again, I don't want this to be a cookie cutter or a magic formula. There are going to be exceptions to this. There are going to be some times when you may have a particular project that takes you a little bit more than 5 hours a day. But this should be your mantra. This should be kind of your default by which you're going to live your life. If you're following me and if this resonates with you, is that most of the time, the majority of time, nearly all of the time, you shouldn't work more than 5 hours a day on a particular project. and you must exercise, play, you must do something at least 1 hour every single day. And probably the hardest thing for many of us is to literally take one day off during the week that we do not do any work at all, that we don't check our work email, that we're not on a computer unless we're on a computer to have fun. For example, when I do music, I'm recording music into a computer, so I'm on a computer when I do that, but I'm not checking my work email, and I'm not working on anything from work or doing anything like that. Now, here's what most of us do, if we're honest. Now, think about this. If you are sincerely honest about how you schedule your life, how you use calendars and appointments and different things like that, here's what most of us do. We schedule our work, but we leave our leisure unscheduled. We don't schedule it. We let it be spontaneous. We say, okay, if I exercise, I'll just do that and remember it. I'll be spontaneous about when I play. We don't want to schedule that. We only schedule our work. And the fact is, it doesn't work. When we do that, we will neglect it. We will push it aside. And we need to first start with the first things, the important things, and we need to schedule them into our week. If you are spontaneous about your leisure work, it just doesn't work for most people, to be honest with you. I meet very few people that can be spontaneous and actually do it on a daily basis. You need to write it down. And I think this is part of why Neil calls this the unschedule, because the most important things to produce quality work are generally the things that people don't schedule. And also, I think he means this from the fact that our leisure is a relief from crazy schedules of work only, thus the unscheduled part. Okay, so let's get practical now, yet again, and talk about what are the actual steps to doing this type of scheduling in your life. What does it look like? How do you actually do it? So I want to give you basically 8 steps of doing this. I think Neil in his book gives like 11 or 12 steps, but I found some of the steps in there to be a little redundant perhaps, and I've collapsed a few of these here. So number 1, what you need to do, the very, very first thing, as we've already said, you start out a blank canvas of your week, of your schedule, of your calendar, and you schedule your leisure and your health into that week. Where are you going to exercise? Where are you going to do leisure and fun activities? When are you going to do such thing as eat and have meals? When are you going to sleep? When are you going to go to sleep? How long are you going to sleep? Maybe there are some meetings that you already know are scheduled and you can't get out of those types of things. And so go ahead and schedule those as well. But especially free time, recreation, leisure reading, socializing, lunches and dinners with friends. If you're doing healthy activities such as swimming, running, tennis, working out at a gym, and you want to put all of these down into your calendar for the next week, go ahead and put them in and schedule them. And you may also want to put in some things like commuting time. Some of you live in big cities with lots of traffic, and you may have 30 minutes or an hour to commute to work. So go ahead and put that in there as well. If you're taking classes, if you have medical appointments, all of that stuff would go first because it's all about things that you need. Your commuting time, your eating, your sleeping, your fun time, your recreation, all of that needs to go in there. But at this point, do not schedule work. You do not want to schedule work at this point. You're scheduling your leisure, you're scheduling your health, you're scheduling any kind of meetings that you already have. Fill in your week with guilt-free play. And remember, you want to leave at least one full day a week for recreation and for any small chores that you need to do. No work on that day, no work emails that day. As Neil says, work will be less of a burden when you are experiencing the better parts of life now and your life is not on hold because of work. Now, this one day off is very much like in some religions a Sabbath, where they literally were taking a day off from work. And I think that's a jolly good idea. I really do. It's something that is a part of certain people's religions, but apart from religion, I just think it's a stinking good idea. Maybe stinking isn't the greatest word to use, but I just think it's a great idea that we function better if we just have a day off. And you need to do that. 7 days a week, you can afford to take a day off. I don't care how busy you think you are. I live and have always lived for the last 5 to 7 years an incredibly busy life. If I ever detailed all of the stuff I do, you would be surprised I'm even doing a podcast right now. And how on earth am I writing these songs when I have all this other stuff that I actually do? I just think based upon my life that I can. And there's some times when it's hard. There's some weeks that it's like, man, I just don't see how I can take a day off. But I push myself constantly to this. Brandon, you've got to take at least one day off this week and get away from work, do something fun, put it away. It will be there when you get back the very next day. And like I said, if it helps, to think of your life in different time elements. So instead of 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. that night, if that's your day, think of your day instead of 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. the next day. So if you want to take a day off, well, then start at 6 o'clock on Friday night. And from 6 o'clock on Friday night until you go to bed, all day Saturday until Saturday night at 6 p.m., don't do any work then. And then for some of you who really need to be present because of a job or something like that, and you can't skip a whole day, well, guess what? You can be active on Friday before 6, and then you can be active on Saturday after 6 p.m., but you have a full 24 hours of getting away from work. It's magical to me, I'm telling you. I just wish somebody would have told me this years and years ago. It's a radical way of thinking of life differently by just playing around with the clock and getting away from a 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. type of mentality for taking a break from something. But we've talked about this before. The whole point of this, the whole point of taking a day off is recreation, recreate yourself, or rejuvenation. And the idea of rejuvenation that comes from the original word is kind of a Latin word. Again, means again. And the juvenus is actually a Latin word for young. And so it means to become young again. So when you rejuvenate, you're becoming young again. When you're recreating, you are recreating yourself. You are getting back to a point of passion and creativity in your life. And you do that by taking a day off. So that's the first step. So you're going to, first of all, take a blank canvas of the next week or next month. You're going to start putting in that month your leisure activities, your health, your fun activities, your recreation, your days off, and you're seeing how that all fits into your schedule. And you also have your meetings in there, so you have certain things that you have to do at a particular time. But now you look at your schedule and you see all the spare parts. So you see the empty spaces where you're not doing something leisure, you're not commuting somewhere, you're not eating, you don't have a meeting on that particular day. Okay, those empty spaces are now opportunities for you to do new work and to work on projects and to work on different things in your life. But now what Neil recommends is that you only write down things in those empty blocks when you have actually spent 30 quality minutes working on it. So he would suggest that you don't even write it down. So if you're going to work on a project, a presentation, your taxes, or something like that, then you would only write it down in that empty block in your schedule once you actually do at least 30 minutes of quality work there. Now, for me, I still like to see this on my calendar. So I have this empty block here, and I say, okay, for project A, I want to work on it then. I think this would be a good time for me to work on it. I'm going to schedule 30 minutes for me to work on it. I like doing that still. So what I like to do is I use two calendars for this. So I have one calendar in which I will schedule these types of things after I've already scheduled my leisure. So I'm always doing that first, scheduling my leisure, scheduling different things like that. Then in those empty spaces, now I will start scheduling to do different projects and work. And I will use my reverse calendar and fill up a lot of those spaces. One that basically helps me schedule when I'm going to start my 30-minute task. So that's the point of this first calendar. When I fill in those empty spots, I'm basically scheduling when I start that particular 30-minute task. Then I have another calendar that I'm only going to fill out. This is basically what Neil is suggesting. This particular calendar, I only fill out the empty spaces when I've actually finished 30 minutes of quality work. So one calendar is kind of just a general guideline of when I'm going to start these 30-minute task opportunities, and then another calendar that chronicles or journals when I've actually finished 30 minutes of quality work. Now, Neil suggests that you don't take credit for work unless it is quality and is uninterrupted. So, for example, if you get interrupted by a text message for 10 minutes while you're supposed to be working 30 minutes on a particular part, and you only work for 20 minutes, then you don't take credit for it. So you take credit and write it down when you've done 30 minutes of uninterrupted quality work. Now, by the way, Neil doesn't mention this in his book, but for many of us to have real, honest, uninterrupted work, that means we may need to turn off our email. That means we may need to put our phone on airplane mode to get away from text messages, to turn off instant messaging on our computer and notifications and all this type of stuff. We have to do that. So don't deceive yourself in some way, because quite honestly, I don't know of anyone who can get text messages or email alerts and not be distracted. There's been too much research showing that you can't do it. People will get distracted and will lose their concentration. So it bears mentioning, although Neil doesn't mention it in his book, when you do 30 minutes of quality uninterrupted work, you need to turn off all distractions. And if people around you distract you, or there's a possibility they could come interrupt you, then you need to go somewhere where you won't be interrupted. Find some private space somewhere that you can actually do that work uninterrupted. Okay, so first step, we scheduled our leisure time. The second step is we start recording our 30-minute task. And if it helps, you can plan that out. But I would encourage you to have a separate calendar where you actually journal when you did the 30-minute work and you were successfully doing that. The third step is you want to reward yourself with a break or a change to a more enjoyable task after each period that you've worked something. Either you do another task after the 30 minutes, or better yet, do something leisure-wise, like take a walk or read for 10 or 15 minutes from a book. But do something. Take a break after you've done 30 minutes of quality work, change up pace, do something different. And there's an added benefit for doing this. Psychologically, you are starting to associate work with fun. And this is rejuvenating things because it's not all about all work and no play, as many of us have been raised to do, where you just must work all the time, and you shouldn't do anything else than that. No, you work, and then you rest and you relax for just a few minutes, then you go back and you work, and then you take a break and you rest and relax. I've heard, and I haven't researched this, and so I probably shouldn't even mention this, but I've heard that Google is an excellent example of pushing this type of mentality, where they actually encourage their employees to take 10% of their schedule and do something creative with it in their job. And I think they also do a good job at trying to do these types of breaks, or encouraging people to work really hard and then take breaks and do something fun and do things like that. Number 4, at the end of the day, you should evaluate how you did. And this is why Neil suggests that you have a calendar where you are honestly recording when you've done 30 minutes of quality work. And not to put down if you only did 15 and say it was 30, but be honest. How much quality work did you do? Because at the end of the day, you want to evaluate how you did. And what did you accomplish today? And honestly, if you didn't do good, well, then learn from it. Don't beat up on yourself. Don't condemn yourself. Simply learn what happened and then brush the dust off of you, get back up on your feet, go after it the next day. Learn from your mistakes. Remember, we've talked about this numerous times. Failure can often be your greatest teacher in life if you just let it be that. But if you don't really write down what you did today, then you'll never know where you can improve. And this is an important point, that you need to write down this in your life. Now, I will tell you honestly that I don't always write it down as much as I used to in the past, but that's because I've trained myself to think this way. So for some of us, then the more you do this and the more you write it down and evaluate these things, you may start being able to do this more in your head, and it becomes more of something that's automatic for you. But I still do write things down. And especially when it comes to the first step about planning out my leisure, I still do that to this day. But sometimes I don't always chronicle my work, and I probably should do a little bit more than what I do now. But I used to do it quite a bit because I was training a new habit. I was training myself for the now habit, and that meant really evaluating how I was doing work during a particular day. Number 5, remember this Sabbath idea. You must have a day away from work, at least one. And if you can do more than one. Now, this step kind of goes with number 1 because you really should have already planned this out and scheduled it in your calendar for next week. But do it and keep it. So I think the point here is that you've already scheduled it. Now don't neglect it. Don't ignore it. Don't put something in its place, but really be diligent about keeping this one day off every single week, and keep it faithfully. Keep it like your life depended upon it, because my friends, it actually does depend upon it. Number 6, keep focusing on starting. Remember, this is a journey, not a destination. Focus on starting more than finishing. Finishing is all about tomorrow. I mean, if you think about it, you're doing something, and if you think about finishing, I need to finish, that's always something that's probably on the horizon. That is in tomorrow's world, not today's world. You can't live in tomorrow. In fact, the DNA of starting is embracing the now moment. Let me say that again, just in case you missed that. The DNA of starting is embracing the now moment. If you're going to really start something, the foundation of it is to embrace now. If you're embracing tomorrow, if you're trying to live in tomorrow, you won't start because you're too focused on the end. You need to focus on now. What can I do now to start moving in that direction? Number 7, you need to think small. Remember, the goal isn't to write the paper or to finish the presentation or to do the entire analysis or write a book, nor is it that you should work for 4 hours straight on something. The goal is small, 30 minutes. That's all that Neil and I are asking that you do. Not that you work 4 hours straight, that you only work for 30 minutes, quality, uninterrupted work. That's all that we're asking that you do. If you must work on it more than 30 minutes in a day, then you only work on it at 30 minutes at a time. So if you feel like I need to spend 4 hours working on this project today, I can't do any less than that, Brandon. I can't just spend 30 minutes. Well, okay, I hear you on that and understand, but here's how you should approach it. You should approach it from 30-minute segments. So now I'm going to have to schedule 8 30-minute segments to get 4 hours in. So I'm going to work for 30 minutes and then I'm going to take a break for 10 or 15 minutes. I'm going to come back for 30 minutes and I'm going to take a break. Then I'm going to do 30 minutes and I'm going to take a break. I'm going to have to squeeze in 8 of those in my day. If I really must work 4 hours, I will refuse to work 4 hours straight with no breaks and no rewards. I'm going to schedule it in chunks of 30 minutes. And number 8, in the end on a good note. And this is what Neil says about this. He says, that is, never stop work when you're blocked or at the end of a section. Remember Grandma's principle to create good habits. And he says this early in the book. Grandma's principle is that you need to eat your vegetables before you can have dessert. So he says, remember Grandma's principle. To create good habits, your breaks and treats must follow some work. No treats until you face what you have been avoiding. Never take a break or a reward when you're at the end of a segment or when you're ready to give up. Always stay with a tough spot for another 5 or 10 minutes, trying to come up with at least a partial solution that you can pursue later. Remain open and curious about how your mind will rapidly and creatively solve the problem. You'll find that staying with a difficulty for a few more moments is often enough for your brain to creatively resolve it. Gently pushing through a block or starting on the next section before you quit creates positive momentum, making it much easier to get started next time, thus eliminating the need to procrastinate. Now, Neil showcases several examples of the UNschedule in his book, and there's no way I can really describe them to you on the show. I could stick them in the show notes, but honestly, it's so much detail that I don't want to infringe his copyright on this book. I would just highly encourage you to pick up a copy of the book if this is something that's resonating with you and you're saying, wow, I would love to see an example of what this looks like for someone. He shows this in numerous detailed examples in his book. And I've provided a link to the book in my show notes. So please go to firstthingsproductivity.com/24 and look down in the show notes at the bottom of the page and you will see a link to the book. You can often pick up this book for $4 or $5 through Amazon, and it's a great use of your money. I would highly encourage it. Now, Neil concludes this chapter with some insights that he has noticed from people who do this type of unscheduling. And as you work on this the next several weeks, come back to this episode and see if any of these points ring true for you. So these are his conclusions about what happens to many people as they do this. First of all, you might find that you're busier than you thought you were, and thus you might have to set some priorities or focus on the important versus the urgent things, which we talked about in like my second or third episode of this podcast, or simply learn to say no to some things. The other thing you might find is that certain days are less productive than others. I can see that in my own life, that there are just 1 or 2 days in my week that I tend to be less productive than other days, and that helps me in how I schedule them and how I treat them. Some days might be so busy that you need to lower your expectations about getting started on a big project. There are some days that we have medical emergencies or just other things that pop up and we just can't get started on it. So you shouldn't beat up yourself over those types of things. Even a half hour of work on your project is enough to maintain momentum and avoid the extra burden of having to overcome inertia tomorrow. Now, some of you who listen to me may really doubt this 30-minute deal. And you're saying, Brandon, there's no way I can do that. I'll never get anything done if I only devote 30 minutes to it. I've got to devote 5 or 6 hours to it at a time. And I would just want you to try it. Just try and see, because you still can do the same amount of work. And you say, yeah, but you're adding more time by taking breaks and doing all this stuff. I just need to work straight through. And I'm telling you from my experience and many of the people that I've counseled, this works a lot better. If you take time for yourself, take time to give your mind a rest, do something fun. Don't make it all about, I must work all of the time and I can never have fun. Don't do that even during your work. Constantly allowing yourself to have fun is essential to doing this. And I think you'll find that it works. And I think if you try it for a few weeks, you'll come back and realize, 30 minutes was enough. I could really do some very quality work in 30 minutes of time. And the last thing he says is that you will be tempted after a few weeks to stop filling out your leisure time on your calendar. Now, I've noticed this when I first started doing this, is that I wanted to just start going back to the spontaneous mode of doing my leisure time. I didn't want to write it down. I want to still write down my work stuff though. And you need to really commit to keeping your leisure activities. And the only way you're going to commit to that is by writing it down. And to this day, to be honest with you, like I said earlier, I don't always write my work stuff down. I write down my meetings and appointments, but my work opportunities, I sometimes slip and don't do that. But I am so determined. I still, to this day, I refuse to not write down my leisure activities. I must write them down. Every week, I write them down. I take a Friday or I take a Sunday, I sit down and I go ahead and plan out my leisure and my fun for next week and put it in my calendar. And I still do that to this day. And I would encourage you to do that as well. I'm trying to get back into a better habit of doing my work as well so I can really see how I did during a given week. But I am determined to not let the leisure go past me, not because I'm lazy, remember, but because it works and it makes me more motivated and more energized to do my work, more focused to do my work, more energy to do my work. Now, one last thing for today. I really think Neil's suggestion of limiting yourself to 30 minutes of work will work for most people. It works for me quite a bit. But let me just mention this really quick. And this is not in the book. This is just my own advice to you. If you find yourself overwhelmed by even that, and some people listening to me may be dealing with such severe procrastination that even 30 minutes seems overwhelming to you. Well, if it does, go smaller. There's nothing wrong with going smaller. Do 20 minutes or even 15 minutes. And again, for some of us, 15 minutes may sound ridiculous. Oh, how on earth are you going to do anything in 15 minutes? Well, you'd be surprised how much you can get done in 15 minutes of time. Don't knock it until you've tried it. And if you really suffer from a lot of procrastination, you may even need to go down to 15-minute increments. Now, again, back to my dissertation days. There was a time, and I remember this vividly, a dark, depressing time for me in my dissertation. I was so stressed out and overwhelmed, I just couldn't get going. And even the thought of 30 minutes stressed me out. So you know what I did? I started just doing 15 minutes a day for several weeks, and that's all I did. I told myself, okay, you feel overwhelmed and you feel stressed out and it makes you feel stuck, and all you're going to do is 15 minutes. And these voices in my head saying, Brandon, you're so lazy. You need to do more than 15 minutes. You'll never finish. And I said, no, listen, I'm not doing it. I haven't done anything for the past 2 weeks. I'm so stressed out about this. I'm going to quit with all this negative thoughts. I'm just simply going to do 15 minutes on this for the next several weeks, and I'm not going to feel guilty for it. I know I'm working on something. It's maybe not a lot of time, but let me see where I am in several weeks. Well, again, 2 days is 30 minutes of work. 4 days is an hour worth of work, and do that over a couple of weeks. And yes, maybe I've only spent 2 or 3 quality hours of work, but that's 2 or 3 quality hours toward my goal. See, that's the thing we got to keep in mind. If you do anything, even if it's just 5 minutes of quality work, and we're talking about quality work, not you daydreaming or answering instant messages, but really working on something, you are moving forward step by step. And that's the whole purpose, is that you don't become stagnant and just sit there doing nothing, but you're actually moving towards your goals. And sometimes if you only take one step, as seemingly insignificant as that seems, it is still a step forward. And in the end, that's all that matters. So don't be afraid to play with the time, but be consistent and do strive for the 30-minute increments like Neil suggests. So for me, my ideal state is I do 30 minutes of focused work, then maybe I take 10 minutes and I read my favorite blog and I reward myself. Then I go to 30 minutes of focused work on another project. Then I take a 10-minute walk. Then maybe I do 30 minutes of focused work on the first project. And then after that, maybe I close my eyes and just breathe and eat a snack and just relax for a few minutes. And then this is how I do my day in these 30-minute blocks, followed by some type of reward, then followed by some recreation, some major amounts of recreation, and other times in my week, and then one day a week where I'm focused on not doing anything and just having fun and spending it with friends and family and relaxing and doing music and doing creative fun stuff. So try this out in your own life and let me know how it works. Give me some feedback. Tell me if this is working for you, if you have problems or questions in getting it to work. And I think you'll find that it works. I've found that it works for everyone that I've ever given this to, and I've given this to hundreds of people, students and teachers and relatives and family and people I've counseled in life, and it works for people, and I think it will work for you as well. Well, that wraps up this episode on the UNschedule, how to combine the last few weeks, such as guilt-free play, into action plans for our lives. Now, we have just 3 chapters left in our study on procrastination. Can you believe it? We've gone through a lot of material, a lot of chapters, Only 3 chapters left in Neil's book. Next week, we will look at chapter 7, which he titles Working in the Flow State. Now, I've also been thinking about, okay, what do we do for our next series after this? I really enjoy doing these series. As I said before we started this, one of my pain points that I discovered is that I don't always like doing just one episode type of things because I really want to dig it apart over several weeks. Now, I still want to return to the issue of happiness. I have not left it. I have not forgotten it. In case any of you are wondering, did whatever happened to that, I still want to do that. But my most popular episode so far, any guesses maybe what that might be out of all of them? I've done multitasking, learning, I've done fear of failure, I've done stuck emotions, all these. My most popular episode has been the one that I did on saying no. How do you say no to manipulation and guilt and different things in life? And that is actually my most popular episode. So I am currently thinking that we will do several weeks on assertiveness in our lives, possibly even doing another book study on that and really digging into how we can be more assertive in life, how we can say no to things, and how that really works itself out, because a lot of people, that episode seems to be resonating a lot, and I think it would do us well and do me well that we go into multiple week study on exactly how we become more assertive in our lives. I'll let you know next week more about that possibility, and if we do another book study, what book you might want to pick up to kind of do some extra studying as well. As always, please consider leaving me a rating and comment on iTunes. This helps greatly in letting others know about the show. Remember, I'm also on Double Twist, I'm on Zune, BlackBerry, and Stitcher, and different places like that. So feel free to check out those, as well as my own website. You can listen to free, and you can actually download my episodes directly off my website if you'd rather do that as well. And as I asked at the beginning of the show, my wonderful listeners in Canada, in the UK, in Germany, Australia, and other parts of the world, but especially those, you guys are in my top list of people outside the United States listening to my show. I would love if you would leave me feedback. Would you please consider leaving me some feedback on iTunes if you listen to me there, leaving me a comment there? I would greatly appreciate that. As always, if you have any comments on this episode, I have a discussion area set up at firstThingsProductivity.com/24. So until next time, remember this: you are most productive when you do not ignore play, leisure, and recreation in your life. The DNA of starting is embracing the now moment. So, with that in mind, embrace today with passion and intention, and don't die with your music still inside you.